Hello everybody, how's it going and welcome back to another video. And today I'm going to be showing you how to make this procedural landscape material within Blender and within EEVEE, because a lot of landscape materials only kind of work within cycles because of the displacement method. But what we're going to do is make a material that, as you can see here, if we change the scale and the height of it, the material reacts appropriately. The rock material will stay on the side and the green grass material will stay on the top. Now, in other tutorials that I've seen, you get this massive complex mess of nodes, and it's so overwhelming, it's so confusing. It took me ages to try and find exactly what I was looking for. You've got all these materials, and I thought, well, you know what, even if I simplify it like this, it's still way too much. So I wanted to make a video that simplifies the core theory of it down to literally basic materials and colors, how exactly you're going to blend them together. And then another tutorial is going to come which gets into more detail on the actual texturing of each material. But today I just want to focus on here on showing you, here you go, the green. How do you separate a green secondary material from a brown primary material, a sand, little shoreline, and then water on the base level as well? Because if you know how to do texturing, you don't need me to explain how to do that to you. You just want to know how to separate these materials. If you just want to skip all of this and just get the texture yourself, there is a link in the description to get this texture from Gumroad. It's only £2. It really helps me out and it saves you some time as well. And what you can do is go in and customize it however you want, change your textures, do whatever you want with it. Completely customizable. But instead of that, let's get into the video. So firstly, let's start off, let's create a plane, scale it by 5. I love the number 5. What we're going to do is subdivide it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 times. We're going to smooth it out and we're going to go over to the modifier panel, add a modifier, and we're going to add a displace modifier over here. Go down to texture, new, and change the type from image or movie to clouds. Just change this to solid so we can see what we're doing. We're not blinded to this little camera. Now, this is going to be the basis for generating our terrain. There are a couple of ways you can generate terrain. This is going to be one of them. And if we change the size here to create some nice little rolling hills so that it's not over the top, change the depth. This will give us a bit more detail on the landmass. And we're going to go down now to the brightness and contrast. This will allow us to change the height and sea level, essentially. If we change the brightness, that will change how high or low the landmass is in relation to our sea level, and the contrast is going to change how tall or flat our terrain is. Now, this is up to you to play around with it however you want, change the landmass to be whatever you want to be. Another way you can do this is by adding a mesh, and if you have the Ant landscape material add-on enabled, we can create a landscape this way that is already procedurally created. Add some presets in, you've got a load here if you don't want to play around and customize it yourself. But today we're going to use the custom one that we just made there. It's important to note that if you do want to customize your own terrain, now this is very important. As I say, within cycles, you can use the displacement method of the texture to generate the terrain. Within EEVEE, you can't do that. So we're going to have to apply all modifiers here, which is a bit annoying, but once we create this material, it is procedural, so you can add it to any object, any mesh, and it will always work. So if you want to create the terrain again from scratch, you can. Now, here is the much more simplified version of that material from the start. And as you can see, generally, it's pretty straightforward. There's not a billion nodes. Yes, there's quite a few, but I will go through with all of them to show you exactly what they all do. Essentially, we're just blending core textures together. We've got this main texture, which is our rock, and that's going to be the basis for the landmass. We've got our water texture, which is very, very simple. Then we've got over here our grass blend texture, which is our secondary texture. And right down on the bottom as well, we have our sand or shoreline texture as well, which is just a sort of orangey color. Now, of course, this is creating a grassy, rocky mountainscape with water. You can make these colors or textures whatever you want them to be. This is just an example of this sort of landmass. Now let's get cracking with the material. We're going to make a new material, move the output over here, move the principled shader over here, add an input texture coordinate, and what we want to do is separate the water from the landmass first. Now, to do that, we're going to use this node that you might not have used before, but it's under converter and it's called separate X, Y, Z. Now, this is the magic node that's going to give our material the information it needs in order to separate the different colors by the height. Now, what we're going to do is use this node to say that anything at a surface level, this flat surface level on the Z axis, is going to be the water, and anything above it is going to be the mountain. So we're going to add a color ramp. We're going to connect generator to vector, Z to Z. And what we're going to do here is now duplicate this principled shader so that we have one that we can use as our rocky main texture. If we go into render mode here so we can see what we're doing. And then this secondary principled shader is going to be our water. If we bring the metallic up and the roughness down, just plug that in there so you can see. So that's our water shader. This is our main primary mountain shader. Of course, very simplified, no textures yet. This is just the theory of it. But how do we separate that bottom from the mountains? Well, I'm going to go to shader, mix shader, and this really is how simple it is. We're going to connect both of these principled to the inputs and this color ramp to the factor, plug that into our output, and we're pretty much there. Now, obviously we're not seeing a lot, but what we want to do is use this color ramp here to basically change the values of the Z. So if we push the white all the way down, we're basically going to crush the water down as far as it can go and blend it in with the mountain material that is underneath. And there we go. That's pretty much it. And that's just using that Z axis height in order to say, okay, well, anything below here, and we're going like 0.005 here. It's very, very small numbers, but it's just going to push everything. So anything that's completely flat is going to be blue water. Anything that's above that is going to be the mountain. Now, that's great. That's pretty much the core theory of what we're going to be doing forwards to produce the sand, which we're going to do now. Now, if we duplicate the principled shader, we're going to duplicate the separate X, Y, Z and the color ramp. The concept is exactly the same here to blend the sand into the mountain. Exactly the same. Now we're going to create a mix shader again, and we're going to do the exact same thing. We're going to put the mountain into the top of the mix. We're going to put the sand into the bottom of the mix. We are going to connect the generated texture input into the XYZ, Z into the color ramp. And there we go. Again, okay, so we have the same thing here, but obviously we want the sand to be a bit higher up. Now, what's actually happening here is the sand is on top and the mountain is below. Now we want the opposite to happen, so we're going to switch those around in the shader, push those down, have the sand creep a little bit higher up onto the mountain itself. And there we go. That's it. Now, obviously, this isn't looking great because we have the sand where the water should be, but also where the sand should be. So what do we do now? Well, we're basically going to overlay the water texture on top. We're going to connect this mix to the mix with the water, connect that into the output, and bam, we are done. It really is that simple. We're going to use mix shaders to blend the shaders together, and then we're using the X, Y, Z values and a color ramp as the factor. That really is the simple nature of this type of landscape material. Something that took me forever to find when looking online, but I hope that this is giving you a good idea on generally the type of approach that we're using, the workflow that we're using here to create this. Now we want to go one step further. This brown mountain material, we want to add a secondary color in. So we're going to move this over here and we're going to create a very simple shader, diffuse BSDF, because we just want a green color. And what we're going to do is duplicate this mix shader again. We want to blend this in with the mountain. So we're going to put the mountain in the bottom one, this new diffuse into the top. Now at the moment, again, nothing's really happening. It's green, but all we're doing is basically choosing between one or the other. We want to separate the two. Now something clever that we're going to do here is basically we want the grass to sit on any level that's flat, facing upwards, and the rock mountainy texture to be on the sides. Now this original texture is basically using the physical height data of the Z-axis to separate it. But what we want is we want any face of this geometry that's facing upwards to have the green, and anything that's not to not have that. So if we go to input geometry and take the normal input, and well, actually we're forgetting our key node here. If we shift A, converter, separate X, Y, Z, take the normal from the geometry node, plug that in, and then exactly the same again, we're going to put the Z into the factor. And we're forgetting our color ramp there as well. If we plug that in, exactly the same setup as before, but we're just using a geometry normal node. We're going to switch these around so that the grass is what's sitting on the flat level. And there you go. That is it. What this is doing is basically any face that is facing completely upwards, that's more of a flatter surface, is getting this green grass texture, and the side of the mountain is getting that rocky texture, which is generally what you'd see in real life. You get that grass sort of growing on the flat surfaces and then the rock as the cliff face falls away. And what we can do is just blend that as and how you want it to be. If we go into render view now and have a look, there you go. What we're getting is a lovely water reflective material on the very, very flat surface. The shoreline is blending in. The rock brown texture is on the sides and the green texture is sitting on the top. Now in the next video, we're going to go into adding actual image textures in to replace just the brown colors and just the green colors and get a bit more detail with the water as well. But as a pure concept, that is how you do it. If you know how to add your own textures in, all you have to do is go and replace, for example, just the brown color, add in your image textures where you want. You know what to do. That's how you do it. The grass as well. If you want to add grass in, just take the same shader we did and replace that grass with an image texture. But that's what the next video is going to be about. If you don't want to go through all of that, head down to the description below. There is a Gumtree link if you want to buy this texture. It's only £2. And well, one, that would really help me out. Two, it might save you some time as well. I do hope this was helpful, and as well as just learning how to make a landscape shader, I hope that this gave you some insight a bit more on how material shaders can be utilized. As I say, that separate XYZ node is really, really key, and it's really powerful. You can do a lot with it to control where and how a material is being blended together. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a thumbs up and do subscribe for more content. As I say, I've got a more detailed tutorial coming about adding more textures in, but that's it from me. Thank you so much, and I'll see you in the next video.